Now, there's something that the apostates are talking about and trying to put forward. The media has picked it up. Others have also picked it up. And that is our scriptural position of having two witnesses, a requirement for judicial action if there's no confession.
Jehovah's Witness elders strictly adhere to the two-witness rule concerning every judicial matter, including child sex abuse. They base it off the scripture found in Deuteronomy 19:15.
The scriptures are very clear. Before a judicial committee can be convened, there has to be a confession or two witnesses. So we will never change our scriptural position on that subject.
If they were a legitimate Bible teaching organization, they would have continued reading until they came to Deuteronomy chapter 22, which explains that cases like rape and child sex abuse do not require additional witnesses to the crime.
If, however, the man happened to meet the engaged girl in the field, and the man overpowered her and lay down with her, the man who lay down with her is to die by himself, and you must do nothing to the girl. The girl has not committed a sin deserving of death. This case is the same as when a man attacks his fellow man and murders him. For he happened to meet her in the field, and the engaged girl screamed, but there was no one to rescue her.
See, if you're not careful, that can do some tricks on your mind, because you have to think it through.
So we do need to be careful to measure what we're doing and see if it really is an act of faith or if it's just doing something stupid.
You could say we're stupid.
So again, we want to certainly welcome everyone to our Watchtower study. An article that is very sensitive but very important to address, because we know child sexual abuse is something that is rampant in our society today. So the title of a 4-part series, this one is entitled Part 3 of Part 4, Love and Justice in the Face of Wickedness. And if you look at the preview on page 8, it says this article will consider how children can be kept safe from sexual abuse.
We will learn how elders act in behalf of the congregation.
Keep in mind when reading Watchtower publications or if speaking with Jehovah's Witnesses, when they use the phrase wrongdoing, they are referring to criminal behavior. And when they use the phrase serious wrongdoing, this refers to felonies like statutory rape or even capital offenses such as murder.
Well, if you look at our first subheading, a grave sin, how is child sexual abuse actually a grave sin in the eyes of God? Handling instances of serious wrongdoing, how is that done to protect the congregation? And then finally, how to protect your children from child sexual abuse.
If the body of elders concludes that there is sufficient scriptural evidence to warrant the formation of a judicial committee on the grounds of child sexual abuse, the coordinator of the body of elders should first contact the circuit overseer.
After contacting the overseer, the body of elders begin an illegal investigation into the case of child sex abuse. They interrogate the perpetrator, even though they are not sworn officers of the law, and they interrogate the child victim, even though they are not professional child forensic interviewers.
The testimony of use may be considered. It is up to the elders to determine whether the testimony has the ring of truth.
Jehovah's Witnesses have been accused of failing the victims of child sex abuse after a case in Manchester where a man who was convicted of sexual assault was allowed to cross-examine his victims. The Charity Commission, which regulates the religious group, said the questioning was inappropriate and demeaning. One victim described the meeting as worse than the court case. An audio recording of the meeting has been passed to our social affairs correspondent, Michael Buchanan.
This is New Moston Kingdom Hall in Manchester, where Jonathan Rose spent years as a senior member. In 2013, he was imprisoned for 9 months after being convicted of the historical sexual abuse of young girls. Jehovah's Witnesses went to expel him, but Rose appealed, which led to an extraordinary gathering.
A meeting was called between 8 male elders, a convicted paedophile, and his female victims. Over the course of an evening, the women had to recount what had happened to them, while he, Jonathan Rose, got to interrogate them.
Each woman was questioned separately. One secretly recorded her grilling by Jonathan Rose.
What I'm saying to you is this didn't happen. Now give me one reason please why I would have done it to you. I had no reason to touch you, we were friends.
At one point, another man in the room asked the woman if she'd egged Rose on, and no one prevented him from discussing graphic details.
What was I supposed to have done to you that night? Please explain to me. Not to be perverted, did I touch you down below? Did I touch your breasts?
One victim said she didn't even know Rose was going to be at the Kingdom Hall. She went in the belief the congregation were going to apologise to her with protected identity.
He kept making out I was lying. He kept saying, why did I make it up? Why would I say something like that? And at no point did I feel like he was going to admit it. So as soon as I knew he wasn't going to admit it, there was no remorse, no sorry. That's when I felt like I'd had enough. I just got to the point where I thought he genuinely believes he hasn't done anything wrong.
Her mother, who supported her, was appalled by what unfolded.
I felt guilty because I should have been protecting her. It shouldn't have been allowed. That meeting should not have been allowed, ever.
Jehovah's Witnesses say this evening that they have robust child protection policies and put appropriate restrictions on anyone found guilty of sexual abuse. Today's report, however, said their actions in Manchester failed the women.
It has to be dealt with in a way that is sensitive to the victims who have gone through this terrible ordeal, but also in a way that the public would expect this to be dealt with. And in this case, they let the victims down.
Though Jonathan Rose was expelled from the Kingdom Hall, the meeting here should clearly not have happened. And the Charity Commission have wider concerns about how Jehovah's Witnesses handle sex abuse allegations and are carrying out a broader inquiry. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Manchester.
Yes, and according to Under Expressions Explained, the footnote, how are we to understand, it gives a more explicit definition of what child sexual abuse is. Brother Herbert, please.
It gives a clear understanding that child sexual abuse occurs when an adult uses a child to satisfy his or her own sexual desires. It can include sexual intercourses, oral or anal sex, fondling of the genitalia, breast, buttocks, or other perverted acts. And it says, while most victims are girls, many boys are abused as well. Although most abusers are men, some women also abuse children.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that thought.
When discussing child sexual abuse from a congregation standpoint, we are not considering a situation in which a minor who is a willing participant and who is approaching adulthood is involved in sexual activity with an adult who is a few years older than the minor.
Watchtower just gave the basic definition of statutory rape and claims they do not even consider offenses like these to be a crime.
Because I believe very strongly pedophilia doesn't end with them saying it did. It is a sickness.
A Christian who gives in to wrong desires and commits a serious sin is spiritually sick. This means that he no longer has a healthy relationship with Jehovah. In a sense, the elders are spiritual physicians. They endeavor to make the sick one, in this instance the wrongdoer, well.
So this is a sickness, this wanting to victimize children is really a sickness.
Pedophilia, it doesn't get any lower than this, people. I don't think there are crimes on this planet that I have more disdain for.
Clearly, elders have a weighty responsibility.
This makes the body of elders the judge and jury concerning child sex abuse cases. Most cases are dismissed on the grounds that there are not two or more witnesses to the child's sex abuse.
If the individual denies the accusation, the elders consider the testimony of witnesses. If at least two people, the one making the accusation and someone else who can verify this act or other acts of child abuse by the accused, establish the charge, a judicial committee is formed.
If a member of the media or an attorney representing the accused contacts the elders, they should not give any information about the case or verify that there is a judicial committee. If the authorities request confidential congregation records or ask that the elders give testimony regarding confidential congregation matters, the elders should promptly telephone the legal department.
Again, this information is never given over to the authorities. Evidence such as documents and witness testimonies are never given to the police. They are sealed in envelopes and filed away as confidential and labeled "Do Not Destroy."
Information concerning individuals associated with the congregation and accused of child sexual abuse, established or not, including letters of introduction, should be placed in an envelope labeled with the individual's name and marked "Do Not Destroy." This envelope should be kept in the congregation's confidential file.
Not only does Watchtower refuse to notify the police of sexual predators in their congregation, they are apprehensive about warning parents of small children also.
The service department will direct the elders to inform family heads of minors within the congregation of the need to monitor their children's interaction with the individual.
While this may sound like what any law-abiding citizen would do without having to be instructed, they immediately follow it saying,
the elders would take this step only if directed to do so by the service department.
Fraudulent 501c3 organizations create loopholes in their policies that make unwitting representatives directly legally liable for the crimes they commit on behalf of the corporations they represent. In Watchtower's case, this means that elders could be held responsible for covering up child sex abuse, even though it was suggested for them to do so by Watchtower's secret elders book.
Eventually, showing love would call for even greater sacrifices.
Where are they? Where are they?
But now here's a question. When David got involved with serious sin in connection with Bathsheba, we saw previously in one of our videos, did Jehovah withdraw his loyal love toward David? No, because he was truly repentant.
The elders judge or determine whether an individual can remain in the congregation.
The elders should carefully adhere to all direction provided by the service department. For example, the service department will provide direction when 1. It is determined that a publisher, baptized or unbaptized, who is guilty of child sexual abuse is repentant and will remain in the congregation.
They judge whether the abuser is repentant or not. If he is unrepentant, he is expelled, and an announcement is made to the congregation. If he is repentant, he may remain in the congregation.
If the body of elders believes that one who has engaged in child sexual abuse decades ago may now qualify for minor privileges, such as carrying or attending microphones, operating sound and video equipment, serving as an attendant, or assisting with accounts, literature,
or territories,
they should assign 2 elders to call the service department.
In addition, if the wrongdoer is a part of the congregation, elders are concerned with trying to restore him, if that is possible.
The objective is to reinstate the pedophile so they may continue canvassing territories, searching for new victims.
Recent YouTube video has many concerned over the way a religious group does business.
Jehovah's Witnesses are coming under fire for allowing a convicted child molester to go door to door on their behalf.
News 5 investigative reporter Carlos Vergara looked into the matter. He joins us live in studio. You found out the Springs congregation takes steps to protect itself, but could be putting your family at risk? Tell us about it.
Rob, Elizabeth, this all starts nearly a quarter century ago when Waymont Ivory was convicted of first-degree sexual assault of a 9-year-old girl in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He served time for the crime and says he turned his life around. in large part to Jehovah's Witnesses. But some aren't so forgiving when it comes to the way Jehovah's Witnesses knowingly allow him to approach your homes, all the time keeping it at arm's length when it comes to their own church.
And I've regretted it ever since.
66-year-old Wayman Ivory agreed to this TV news interview so long as we wouldn't show his face.
I had no idea, no clue as to the total effect that it would have.
The effect it would have on the 9-year-old stepdaughter he molested 2 decades ago.
I know that I hurt a little person.
But years later, what has people up in arms is the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses, knowing his past, allowed Ivory to go door to door on behalf of the religious group, a convicted child sex offender, to knock on your door. So we went in search of answers directly from the people that go door to door. We found them in the area of Lazy Lane Circle in northeast Colorado Springs when I was approached by 2 of the women.
My name is Nina, and this is my friend Trudy.
They were eager to speak to me about their mission before I identified myself as a reporter for News 5. But then they quickly went on their way. So we approached them. This time, they weren't so eager.
We'd appreciate it if you followed our request.
Yes, ma'am, but I've done that, and I have no answer. The church allowing an ex-convict to knock on your door. We wanted to know why. Mr. Delaney, this is Carlos. An elder at Kingdom Hall congregation said he would help, but never followed through. When I finally spoke to another local elder by phone, he told us he would get back to us.
I think that I could arrange for today.
Okay. Yes, sir. I'd appreciate that. Our deadline is 3 o'clock this afternoon. But that deadline came and went. So we called the main offices of...
Good afternoon, Jehovah's Witnesses.
You're Wayman Ivory?
Yeah, and who are you? This all came to a head after Roman Vargas confronted Wayman Ivory in a Colorado Springs neighborhood.
You're a convicted violent child rapist?
The YouTube video had thousands of views and many angry comments in only days before it was taken down. In the video, Ivory denied the charges.
No, you got it all wrong.
We found out that Ivory had indeed served less than a year of a 10-year sentence for the attack on the young girl. So we knocked on Mr. Ivory's door in the Springs. Talking about your past.
No, absolutely not.
Sir? Initially, Ivory wouldn't talk to us, but eventually did so because...
I feel like dirt.
Sidebar, we're still waiting to hear back from Jehovah's Witnesses regarding their door-to-door policy on convicted criminals.
We need to be very conscious of, it was mentioned that elders are not judges, and we're not all the time. Most of the time, we're mostly like everybody else. We study the scriptures, we help the people, the friends in the congregation, with counsel and direction by means of scriptures. We not that often become judges. So you can imagine the research and studying that we have to do every time there is a judicial case. We have to do it because we're not up on top of it. We remember a lot, but there's still we have to go over it, and that's direction. So it shouldn't take lightly when they hear a verdict from the body of elders, whether it's not when they're not found guilty or not when they're innocent. When they hear of a case, just take the word of the elders because they do a very hard job.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a nice point.
Considering Watchtower encourages Jehovah's Witnesses to engage in criminal behavior worldwide, could their violations of 501c3 statutes be the crime that breaks Watchtower's bank?
Less a charity, more of a personal piggy bank for Donald Trump and his children. That's the accusation by New York's Attorney General as the Donald J. Trump Foundation agrees to dissolve under court supervision. Following a 21-month investigation, Attorney General Barbara Underwood said,
Our petition detailed a shocking pattern of illegality involving the Trump Foundation, including unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, repeated and willful self-dealing, and much more. This amounted to the Trump Foundation functioning as little more than a checkbook to serve Mr. Trump's business and political interests.
In addition to $2.8 million in restitution and penalties, the lawsuit seeks to ban Trump and his children Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka from leadership roles in any other New York charity. Under the terms of the agreement, Underwood will oversee the distribution of the foundation's remaining funds to ensure they go to legitimate charities. The investigation could still result in further penalties against the president and his children, and is likely to play a part in Trump's 2020 re-election campaign.
It is doubtful American taxpayers would want an organization like Watchtower having a tax-exempt status. But could the average American tolerate these criminalistic behaviors from a tax-paying corporation?